Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Camp, the lead instructor for ED 779, Values in School and Society. This week I'm going to introduce you to an article called Village to the City that was written by Dr. Delbert Wiens, and at the same time introduce you to the analytical framework that we'll be using for the course. The analytical framework used for ED 779, Values in School and Society, has three components: the ideology, or statement about our values, schools, and context, or political economy. Many things may be considered ideology or values, but we will focus only on four as they pertain directly to education: the aims of education, views of the learning process, views of the learner, and views of what constitute knowledge. Schools are the very practical, lived-out ways that we create educational experiences. This term is broad enough to include the informal training offered by Socrates and Confucius, as well as the highly structured systems that govern the lives of people from toddler to young adult life in our society. Political economy refers to the broad social and cultural forces of a society, particularly focusing on politics and economics, but it most certainly includes many other aspects of life. The analytical framework is never static. Each part pushes and changes the other. These changes may at times seem small and gradual, or monumental and rapid. It may take years, decades, or even centuries to be able to more clearly see the truly significant changes that came like the movement of tectonic plates. In order to illustrate this type of long-term shifting foundation, we will use the 1973 essay by Dr. Delbert Wiens, Village to the City, A Grammar for Languages We Are. Dr. Wiens, who is an emeritus professor of philosophy at Fresno Pacific University, wrote this essay for the Mennonite Brethren denomination, the church body that started the university originally as Pacific Bible Institute, to help them understand long-term changes they were experiencing. There are many things that he observes that are true of other groups as well, particularly ethno-religious groups. We will use this writing to introduce the three parts of the analytical framework and to consider how change might look over a long period. Time has a way of changing our values in imperceptible ways. So we need stories of our own history to help us see and judge those changes. While we introduce the idea of change here, we will come back to it at the end of the course when we examine changes occurring in international educational systems. Village to the City provides a model or grammar of how cultural patterns cohere and what happens to various factors as change inevitably ensues. A grammar is a set of rules that govern language usage, but Wiens uses it here to talk about the broad rules that govern societies. They are usually informal, but build up over time and become viewed as the way things are. Grammars are also fluid, perhaps more akin to the movement of a glacier than a waterfall, but fluid nonetheless. Dr. Wiens posits three stages of modern cultural life and their grammars: village, town, and city. Each stage has its own internal coherence, but each also entails features that lead to its instability and transformation to a different stage by participants of the culture. In this lecture, I will attempt to translate village, town, and city into the analytical framework. The following diagram sets up what I will be describing. First, we have the village and the analytical framework that can be applied to it, the town, the analytical framework applied to it, and the city, with the analytical framework applied to it as well. First, we start with the village. In the village, the political economy is based on agriculture, and is a geographical boundary set. The small population base of the village means it usually shares common ethno-religious and linguistic boundaries. The strength of the village is its group cohesiveness and tied to the vitalistic forces of nature. Work is frequently shared among humans and between humans and animals. There are communal celebrations marking significant moments in individual and corporate existence. Religion is often at the center of village life. There is little differentiation between various spheres of life. The village continues to function well when its members accept the social structure and the limitations placed on it by natural cycles. The village faces crisis when it becomes oppressive to members, when it no longer allows for the vitality of individual members, or when it presses beyond the limits of nature. In the ideology, the aim of education in the village is to learn to fit in. Humans must fit into the rhythms and cycles of nature, which provides primary metaphors such as maturity. Just as agriculture aims to produce mature fruit, so village culture aims to produce mature people. Maturity is the mark of one who has appropriately learned the lessons of life and of cultural expectations. That is, one who adequately fits into adult culture and contributes to its reproduction. The sage is the model of one who embodies how life works. The sage has knowledge of what works in a given time, place, and situation. Learning happens by multi-generational trial and error experiences. The individual learns by participating in cultural processes and by heeding the advice of the elders. Learning happens by observation and imitation of others and of the rhythms of nature. Learning has its shortcomings when one is not self-reflective and assumes that the way things are in one place is the way they are everywhere. Change and deviation from routine may present less of an opportunity for learning than a danger to the stability of the group. Everyone is a learner in the village, and the process of learning never ceases. Children learn by absorbing culture. Adults continue to learn by experiential, analogical, and allegorical interpretation of nature and religious texts. Each person must experience the cycle of life and therefore is always a learner. The primary form of knowledge in the village comes from cultural systems, mores, ways of the ancestors, and what works. This is as true of life cycles and relationships as it is of baking bread or farming. Knowledge is often embodied in proverbs or other wise sayings. Sages know when and where to apply appropriate knowledge. Schools did not need to replicate the broad cultural learning that happened everywhere in the village. Every village interacts with the broader world. Other parts of the world, including other villages, have their own languages, cultures, and grammars. Schools in the village allow the opportunity to learn about these other people, places, and things, but it is often limited to knowledge of immediately useful skills, such as reading and writing in the language of the dominant culture, or rudimentary skills in math and science. More advanced education is not always seen as useful or desirable. In the next stage, we find the town. The town is not merely a larger version of the village, though population growth may spur the shift from village to town. A major aspect that causes shift is the belief that nature needs to be made to serve humans. The town allows for and promotes specialization that leads to the subjugation of nature to human will. This is a matter of degree rather than an absolute value, since the village also includes lesser degrees of specialization. The political economy of the town relies upon greater specialization and therefore leads to fragmentation of the various components of life. Isolated, specialized tasks create quantitative efficiencies. Machine power is produced and harnessed. The strength of tools and the repetition of machines are dominant metaphors for the town. Business lies at the center of town life, sometimes literally in the form of Main Street, and usually as an organizing principle for life. The town has geographically separated specializations, and lives are more separated from regions of economic productivity. Economic productivity and specialization allows for and demands greater mobility. Families are less likely to live near extended relations. The notion of a nuclear family comes to prominence, and life is intentionally fragmented into social, political, religious, economic, educational, public, and private spheres. In the ideology, the aim of education in the town is to discover ways to make nature and other humans serve humans. Education serves as a means to discover laws and reduce all-encompassing theories, propositions, and principles that can be used to order and control the world. The aim of education is also to master these rules, thereby becoming a technical expert. Mastery is not limited to the natural world, though the natural sciences and mathematics are central, but includes mastery of human behavior in terms of the social sciences, such as psychology, organizational behavior, marketing, and political science. Learning is the discovery of laws and principles from which it is possible to deduce systematic and all-encompassing theories. Fundamental axioms provide the basis for further learning. These axioms, primarily learned by rote, as given constants, are not necessarily based on observation and experience as they are in the village. Knowledge is built up slowly, but with certainty, through a rationalistic scientific method, so that knowledge can be passed on in systematic processes. One need not reinvent the wheel in order to gain the advantages of learning from prior generations. Learning should continue to advance the total knowledge base. The processes and content of learning are analyzed, and processes are designed to maximize the efficiency of subject mastery. Educational testing for learning is akin to quality control testing in manufacturing. Ideally, anyone should be able to master any knowledge since it is public and not subjective. Learning develops from broad subjects and principles and moves towards narrower and deeper specialization. The ideal image of the learner is the specialist who has mastered a subject matter. Becoming adept at the mechanical learning process and learning both facts and theories at the appropriate pace achieves this. The learner acquires and builds upon the broad knowledge of prior learners. However, the learner needs to be adept when working with abstract laws and principles. In some versions of the town, not only levels of achievement differentiate learners, but also styles of learning. The learner is largely age-graded, both in terms of being processed through the school system by age, but also when assessed by expected age-appropriate attainment. In some forms of town education, learners are not differentiated by gender, socioeconomic level, race or ethnicity, religion, or other factors other than age. An underlying view of the learner is a common or universal human being who is, for the purposes of education, abstracted from all contextual influences. This is an extreme form based on an extreme mechanistic view of humans in the process of learning. While this may be an extreme end of the spectrum, much town education is based by the assumption of the efficiencies of mass-produced public education, where both the raw material and the processes are largely uniform. There is an explosion of knowledge associated with towns. Laws and principles are built into coherent structures of theories, philosophies, theologies, morals, and other systems that are taught through textbooks. The foundations of these laws and principles are basic axioms that are held to be self-evident. Knowledge is unified, but also based on different axioms. If we take physics as an example of the type of knowledge which towns excel, then we note that not only does each type of physics rest on its own axioms and result in its own knowledge, but attempts are then made to unify the knowledge of various types of physics. such as with particle physics and gravitational physics. This illustrates the twin poles of fragmentation and unification. Subjects are initially disaggregated and studied in isolation of context and the subjectivity of the learner, and knowledge is often split beyond knowledge of a subject and use of that same knowledge between theory and praxis. Highly specialized knowledge and mastery of a subject is often tied directly to greater economic productivity and reward, showing that the fragmentation of knowledge into specialized domains leads to greater power. The explosion of knowledge does, in fact, lead to greater mastery and productivity, but it also leads to increased isolation. The tendency towards unification comes at the usefulness of isolated knowledge, either as the limits of the knowledge is reached or when external challenges warrant harnessing various perspectives. Schools are organized by age and further into subjects or disciplines. Teachers are specialists by age or by subject, and schools follow the patterns established in the views of knowledge and learning. The school day is normally divided into time periods that focus on isolated subjects. Experiments in integrated learning try to recombine once integrated world that the process of schooling fragmented. The focus of the school is knowledge formation, or information. It is not concerned with cultural formation. Realms such as culture and religion are subjects to be learned about, but their values are not to be promoted in the schools. That becomes the responsibility of a different fragment of society. And now to the city. Dr. Wiens describes the city with much less confidence, though with great insight. He acknowledges that it is a new kind of reality, though undecided whether it is a collection of prior stages or a new kind of reality. What is certain is that the city represents a much greater sense of fragmentation without boundaries, villages, or centers, towns, though these prior stages form within the larger within the larger city. There is no single common reality in the city that provides a coherent way of life. The cultural grammars of the city are simply different from one another with their own inherent rules. The political economy is marked by plurality, fragmentation, diversity. Politics, economics, and social life move dynamically between multiple, often discontinuous spheres simultaneously. It may seem as if there is a pick and living, but cities also reveal remarkably routine and durable pathways of existence in spite of the diversity of options. Energy can be released at a frenetic pace, with growth and decay happening at once. Dr. Wiens is careful not to denigrate the city completely, but is wary of the personal and social effects. His analysis of the transitions from village to town to city uses language of movement from unity to fragmentation, which reveals a preference for that which is perceived as present before it became fragmented. This is the language of decay or decline from a more golden age. I share some of Dr. Wiens' experience with village culture, but I am less inclined to give it preference. I argue that the city has much power to overcome the local idolatries and xenophobia of the village, as it does to create fragmentation. The city is a place where the power of the town is unleashed on a grand scale, but there is also potential for unmasking the hubris and self-serving nature of that power. The city, like the village and the town, is a mixture of good and bad, positive and negative qualities. New possibilities and challenges emerge that require careful reflection and devotion, not wistful thinking for the ways things used to be. New wineskins are indeed needed for this new wine. In the ideology, the aim of education in the city is to gain skills to be whatever is needed at the moment. Flexibility and adaptability are paramount. tried and true cultural patterns of the village are quaint in the city. The evidence of the town to control an ever-increasing amount of life is hubris. Life changes quickly in the city and the variations increase daily. The ability to be adaptable is evident in the forms of core competencies, such as written and oral communication, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and information literacy. I would like to add to these mediated and multilingual communication and cultural competencies. This is not content mastery, but a set of skills for use in multiple learning areas and social political context. These do not replace content specialists, but they help them to adapt and interact. The village aims at living within natural and social limitations. The town aims to master the natural and social arenas, and the city might aim to manipulate those arenas for one's own purposes, as it lies somewhere between an awareness of human limitation and human ability. Many of the processes of learning in the city are derived from those of the village and the town. The diversity of the city allows for more variations, experimentations, and specialized approaches to learning. I will point out just one feature of learning that becomes heightened in the city: access. Access is a key issue in being able to take advantage of the richness of learning. Cities value many forms of unfettered access, including transportation, communication, socialization, wealth production, education, and a host of other services. However, it also values limits in the forms of gates, passwords, memberships, and so forth. Dr. Wiens points out what he considers to be a darker side of learning in the city. He notes that in the lack of coherence in the city, where many parts are viewed as interchangeable, one learns an unhealthy subjectivism. This may surface in the form of disregard for context-appropriate behavior, lack of coherent psychological unity, narcissism, manipulation, and facile engagement and limited mastery. This may in part explain the value of both access and limit. The process of learning in the city includes discovering and developing skills in accessing within limits, which partially explains the emphasis on critical thinking skills, which is thinking within rational limits, and information literacy, which is access with proper acknowledgement of the work of others. Dr. Wiens claims that the ideal learner in the city is the pop hero or virtuoso. It is not enough to have deep learning of a narrow subject, but it has to be something in demand. And the learner must show rapid adaptability. The term perhaps best associated with this learner is excellent. The term is virtually devoid of content other than to be better than most at something. It becomes a relative term of social comparison. Another term that can be associated with the ideal learner is wonder. The city becomes so filled with variations that the learner can explore seemingly endless avenues. Wonder is also a result of being overwhelmed with unity, beauty, and inexplicability in our experiences. The plurality of the city can result in a loss of sense of integration, pursuit of trivia for the sake of stimulation, or abuse of people in the world due to a loss of sense of connection and accountability. However, the plurality can also result in new and creative integrative designs and care for others and the world. Wonder is often associated with an ideal stage of childhood. In order for adults to renew their sense of wonder, they tend to retreat into nostalgic recovery or fantasies. In order for the adult learners to live productive, meaningful lives in the city, they need to nurture a sense of wonder, think in divergent patterns, bring creativity to new challenges, and to act responsibly in light of larger realities. They will need to learn to connect with others to form new communities and to connect to the world they inhabit. Knowledge in the city can be trivial and disconnected, or it can be meaningful, productive, and connected. The challenge is discerning between activity and fruitfulness. The lack of direction towards either communal well-being or mastery of the world can lead to knowledge being the development of abilities to manipulate and serve only oneself. The question is whether knowledge itself is different in the city, or whether it is the recognition of the limited nature of any type of knowledge and the ends to which knowledge is used that is different. Schools in the city may look like schools in towns, but with greater possibility of being specifically focused or special interest based. Charter schools, magnet schools, experimental schools, and special subject schools abound. Those that will take the most advantage of these opportunities are those who not only have access, but who can generate productive uses for the type of education provided. The plurality of schools can make it difficult to distinguish which schools are providing useful experiences and which are lining their pockets at students' expense. Education in the city remains a necessity, but will be increasingly associated with cynicism and wariness. Educational institutions are constantly under pressure to demonstrate their ability to deliver on their promises. Beyond this is the need for people in the city to develop a sense of where education plays a meaningful role in the life of the individual and the community. As much as educational reform may be needed, a vision of life in the city and education's role in that life is also needed. Dr. Wiens and I have shared various conversations about the pros and cons of the village, town, and city. The value of the tripart model is as a grammar for understanding the dynamics we face in our schools and careers as educational professionals. The grammar or map that the model provides helps us to understand the multiple expectations and often mutually exclusive demands that we face. A student-parent conference may include grandparents who are from a literal or figurative village, parents who bring expectations of the town, and a student who is growing up in the complexities of the city. Our classrooms may have students from village-like enclaves, towns, and cities, each bearing the contributions and challenges of that stage. These teachers rarely face the abstraction of demands, only the layering on of more. We need to learn the ability to untangle the expectations and determine how we can best work with the student, the family, and the school system given our own interests and abilities. The value of Village to the City is in simplifying our problems by providing a model to understand and to do something with what we are given. The grammar allows us to see existing all too familiar realities in a new light. We have an increase in knowledge, which results in the situation of having more tools, but also more responsibility to do something to bring change. And show how it fits within this model. This will include the Fresno Pacific Idea Statement that guides the lives of faculty and students. I will end this lecture with instructions for next week's assignment. You will find a copy of the FPU Idea, which is the guiding statement for the university, in Moodle. Please read through that document and try to translate it into the 4 parts of the ideology: aims of education, view of learning, view of the learner, and view of knowledge. By using the Analytical Framework worksheet, which is also provided in Moodle, this will allow us to develop familiarity with the worksheet, which we're going to use each week as part of reading notes. A word of caution: the FPI Idea uses its own headings that do not match with these 4. You may find statements spread throughout the document that should go under each heading. We will not concern ourselves this week with the other aspects of the analytical framework of school and context or political economy. I hope that you enjoy the reading.